Welcome to another episode of Hat Collecting, the show where we talk about the many different metaphorical hats that people wear in our lives because no one does just one thing and everyone has a story. And this is the show where you get to share those stories. I am your host, Lacey Artemis, a creative Jill of all trades in Toronto, Canada. And today I am joined by Kat, who is an artist, a facilitator, a counselor, and a bat enthusiast. Kat's pronouns are they and them. Welcome to the show, Kat.
Thank you, Lacey. I've been so excited to finally be on your show.
Yes, we've been trying this for a couple of weeks, and my health has not cooperated, but finally it's happening. So yay! Yeah. So the first question the kind of icebreaker that I like to warm up the show with is, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Russia. The city that I was born in, it's called Chelyabinsk, and that's where I spent like the first 10 years of my life. So it's not that small of a city. It's like the 7th largest city in Russia by population, and you'd kind of be surprised. It's pretty industrially advanced. They have like a tractor plant that supplied like tanks for the Second World War effort, and it's just like an industrial city. So its claim to fame is that it was struck by a meteor in 2013. And there's like reaction videos of people just like, going, oh, whatever. So like people from Chelyabinsk are seen to be as kind of like stoic and unsophisticated as like a stereotype. But I don't know. I don't think it's all that true.
I'm going to take a moment now to do a quick land acknowledgement. Toronto, or Takaronto, is located on the traditional unceded territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations, the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe. This is a dish-with-one-spoon treaty territory, and we are uninvited visitors on this land. You can find out more about that at native-land.ca, and despite the name, that actually covers the whole world and not just Canada. So that's native-land.ca for the listeners, and it's on the screen for the viewers. So yeah, thank you for that. It's something I like to acknowledge because it's very important. But with that said, we're going to get into the kind of it's really the core of what this show is about, what it's kind of become about. It is called Hat Collecting. We'd like to talk about the different things that people do. So can you tell our audience a little bit more about the things that you do and how you got into them?
I'm going to narrow down the things I do because I have to. So like with art, it's like I've always loved drawing and making things, but I got discouraged from pursuing it as anything like as a profession. And then like when I was really burnt out in my 20s, I had the opportunity to go back to school. And I'm like, I'm going to do my BFA. Like nothing really matters anymore. Like, life can't get much worse, but I have this chance to like go to art school. And then I got accepted and I was like, wow, I'm in art school. So since then I've tried to explore photography and like sculpture, fibers, street art. I'm not married to any one medium. I've been doing textiles lately, and I've had some art shows. I've sold some of my art. I've been hired on to do art. So I think even though like I can't call my art career like commercially successful, it's it's still something that I'm very proud of. And I've come a long way from wishing I could do art to actually doing it. As for facilitation, like I really love supporting people in their learning. And I haven't found traditional learning environments to be welcoming of people like me. And it wasn't really conducive to my growth as a person. I just kind of felt excluded, even though I was that kid who, answered questions in school before they were asked. And I was kind of like, sometimes I was a teacher's pet, sometimes I was the teacher's nemesis, depending on the teacher, asking too many questions. So I felt that, like the whole teacher-student dynamic, something was off about it as well. And I was like, when I grow up, I'm going to do things differently. And that was an empty threat for like a long time because I started off with tutoring, like reproducing the exact same kind of like, the exact same techniques that were used on me. Then eventually I was like, I do better when I share something with others that I'm really passionate about, and when I let people come to their own conclusions. So I got into facilitating, mostly art, sometimes some social justice topics, or, psychoeducational topics. Now we go on to counseling. So the first undergrad degree that I got was psychology, because I was looking for answers. I'm like, something is up with me and I don't know what, and I really, really, really need to know. So I've always had a really hard time with other people. And, I didn't know why. I had a sense, okay, like I'm a little bit different and I don't seem to understand them. They don't seem to understand me or include me. So I'm like, I'm going to study the hell out of that. So I did. And, it didn't really, it didn't really agree with me what I was learning. So I kind of abandoned it for a while. And then, I went from psychology, I went to hair school. So that's another hat that I've kind of hung up since then. Teaching ESL also didn't really work out for me for many reasons. But, throughout my life, I've had a few really excellent therapists. And after a while, I'm like, this is something that I would probably be good at, because I've spent since early childhood, observing and studying people and trying to understand, why they work the way they do. And I also just love people and really care about people. When I was studying to become a therapist, I realized that, hey, I have some unresolved rescuer complexes in place. And then I was like, okay, I got to work through that a little bit, because I want to, I want to be, I want to be good at what I do. I want to have healthy boundaries. So I'm going to wrap that piece up now, because I want to talk about bats. Bats are awesome. So my love for bats got ignited around my late 20s. I don't know why, but I love these marvelous flying mammals. They make my heart swell. I like looking at their pictures. I like thinking about them. One of my dreams is to be kind of hugged by a flying fox. And I know that we shouldn't touch wildlife, but I'm a dreamer. I got a rabies vaccination. Maybe one day bat rehab when I retire. I have my bat encyclopedias. I have this bat book signed by the author. So yeah, there's actually more bat books. Anyway, and I have bat tattoos on different parts of my body, which I'm not going to show you.
And I appreciate that, because as you know, we do try to keep this show on the PG side of things. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I definitely resonate with a few of the things that you said. Is there any big bat misconception that you want to address?
Oh, there's a ton of bat misconceptions. There's only out of more than 1,300 known species of bats, only 3 are sanguinivorous. So they eat blood. Only 3 of them are vampires. And they're actually the coolest one, because they're socialists and they take care of each other. They adopt orphans. They have reciprocal altruism, because if one of them starves for 2 days, it dies. So they share their food with each other, and they remember who shared food with them. So, some bats are solitary and some bats live, some bats roost together. Bats make friends for many, many. Okay, you tricked me. I mean, bats are awesome. There's just they're so diverse. They're not just one thing. They don't get tangled in your hair, although I wouldn't mind a bat tangled in my hair right now. But, and they're not blind, and even the bats who can see, they can still echolocate, how humans can echolocate. If you've ever yelled down a big empty hallway, you would know, we're not good at echolocation, but we still can. Anyway, so Lacey got me on a tangent. Congratulations.
I mean, this show is all about learning, and hey, I'm all for learning more about bats, so hey, I don't mind. The next question here, the sub-question of that question, I should say, is what would you say, as many of those hats that you mentioned as you want to address, but what would you think, what do you say is like kind of the biggest misconception or misunderstanding about each of those?
The big one is that like the devaluation of art. People don't really value it all that much. And, if I could afford to only do art for the rest of my life, this is what I would probably do. Like when people allude to my livelihood as a hobby or something fun, it's like feels really hurtful and dismissive. It's integral, it's central to my wellness, and it's a huge part of my identity. So like at one point I stopped making fun and cute stuff just so that people wouldn't say that my art is fun and cute. And then I realized, all right, what am I doing? Like I'm only hurting myself with this choice. So, I kind of got over it and I started doing it, again. Therapy, like there's this underlying assumption that like therapists have their lives all figured out. While that's true to a certain extent, because I have done a lot of work trying to be, more aligned with my values and just healthier in general, like you do need a certain degree of stability to be able to do that work safely and to be helpful to others. But therapists are totally human and they're not immune to the mess that entails. Given that, I want to say that boundaries are super important in this work because my natural inclination is to fix whatever's going wrong. And because of, the former Soviet Union and then, non-Soviet Union transition upbringing, I can bend or break the rules that stand in the way. I understand now that, that's not always wise. And like I do my best to respect the client's autonomy and self-determination and let them determine their direction because I can't do the healing for other people. And sometimes you have to let people do their own. Well, pretty much always you have to let people do their own healing. But sometimes, you just can't assume that you know what's best for another person.
Absolutely. That's a lesson I have actually kind of had to learn again recently myself. It kind of shocked me when I realized that I know there's that phrase that, good intent, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And it seems very counterintuitive that when you think you're like actually helping someone or trying to help them and what you're doing actually could be like having a very detrimental effect on them and potentially even yourself. So yeah, I just bought a bunch of new books recently to kind of brush up on some of that stuff.
Oh yeah, we'll have that conversation at some point because
yeah.
I am passionate about books.
But with that, I guess we will move on to the next question to keep the show rolling along. The next question on the list here, which the viewers and listeners will be familiar with, if you're a regular viewer or listener, when you were a child or when you were young, do you remember what you wanted to be or to do when you grew up?
Yeah, so I wasn't really consistent. And I changed my mind all the time, but like some professions that kind of like stick out as private investigator or detective. Like I love Detective Columbo because I guess I was a lot like him, as in like, sticking my nose where it doesn't belong and, an odd fashion sense. Wanted to be a fashion designer. Wanted to be an advertising copywriter. I remember hanging out in my dad's office and just like writing those like ads like with pen and paper. And like I was about 6 maybe. So like my writing wasn't like any good. It must have been hilarious. I wish that's got saved somewhere. And I wanted to rescue cats. So like I really wanted to like, protect all animals.
That's cool. Like, and I can definitely relate to my childhood dream kind of thing changing a lot throughout my life. And there's still lots of hats that I hope I eventually get to wear. We will see. There's still lots of time, hopefully. Yeah, so the next question here, you don't have to say your age if you don't want to, but there's this cultural idea that I always harp on that we're supposed to have our lives figured out by the time we're 30. And for a lot of people, that's not the case. And so I've kind of spun this question around a little bit differently than what I used to ask. And now I'm curious, more, what age were you at when you think that you kind of found the path that you were happy with or that you wanted to continue following for a while? Or if that moment hasn't come yet, at what age or kind of where do you think you'll be when you get to 30 or whatever?
Yeah, well, I'm actually 33 now, and I don't have everything figured out yet. Kind of far from that. So I've had quite a few detours, and like I tried on and hung up many hats, like hairstyling, teaching ESL, doing photography, some, like some other things. Like I think I've done like maybe 30 different gigs in my life, like different kinds of gigs. Uh, but anyway, like some hats didn't fit. Like I think I lost my job as a telemarketer like on the first day. Yeah. So there have been certain choices that I've made at different ages that I've kind of come to appreciate. So when I went to art school in my late 20s, that felt right. Like I was older than about half the students, but I didn't feel too out of place, like uh, my purple hair fit right in, like, like most, like about half the people didn't have their like natural hair color. So, and there were so many like really talented people who actually, cared about art and like who were able to appreciate, my work, and I was able to see theirs. So it was kind of like inspirational working together. So I also became more involved in social justice and activism at that time, mostly around mental health and disability. And so I was really struggling to decide what to do next as I was like finishing off my degree. Because like if I were to go for a master's in fine arts, which is something that I still kind of want to do maybe, but I doesn't seem realistic to me right now, given like everything else in my life. Like I knew that getting a job would be very, very difficult. And, I wouldn't be able to change my life the way that I did if I went that route, that like in that direction. So I did a lot of soul searching, and I was trying to I was asking my friends, okay, what do you think my strengths are? I was talking to professors, different mentors, like whoever I could find, because I needed to know, all right, I know I have these passions, I know I have these talents, but I have no idea how to survive, given the fact that some of the things are not valued as much as others. So somebody suggested social work, and I didn't really know much about social work, but I realized that, hey, I could do counseling with a social work degree. And then I'm like, all right. So that captured my attention. And like when I went to social work school for my master's of social work, that felt pretty right. So I guess like one thing that I can say is that, with time, like by the age of 30, I've become much better at understanding what I want and what I need and what my strengths are. So like my teens, like I'm not even gonna go there. Like my 20s, I spent a lot of time feeling like the turbulence and confusion and just feeling like I don't really belong anywhere or with anyone. And, that used to be the state I lived in. And now the majority of time I'm like, all right, things are okay. I'm content. I have good people in my life.
Yeah, I would say kind of fairly similar for me, I guess. I am 36, actually very soon to be turning 37, and just literally kind of last year, 2020, the worst year that most of us have experienced, and there was tough parts in it for me too, but a lot of positives, thankfully in my case, and I'm still not quite where I ultimately want to be yet, but I do feel like I'm definitely on my way, and it's kind of achievable in some form. So I'm excited about that. I guess you kind of touched on this a little bit because I like to ask about what was like the biggest obstacle that you think kind of prevented you from getting here or to your path sooner.
Like, I don't know about the biggest. Sometimes there are no role models, and there were definitely no role models for, non-binary folks who are, who identify as neurodivergent. And like, these words didn't even exist. Hey, and like sometimes, like I know that like, my brain is wired differently from the majority. I've come to appreciate that, but it's not always appreciated, and sometimes that makes it difficult for me to, I guess, belong, because like I've gotten I've gotten okay at fitting in, but this isn't where I want to spend my time. I don't want to be like rammed into a place where I don't feel like, I can thrive. So, and like, just some things that happened in my, some things that happened in my life. I think that they have taught me things that haven't served me later on. I have trouble accepting um, love from people. Like, compliments make make me feel really uncomfortable sometimes, because I don't know if somebody's trying to like befriend me and make fun of me, or like I don't really know sometimes where people are coming from, and I veer on the side of, all right, like this is dangerous. And then sometimes, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna let myself open up, and guess what?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I know that we do share some neurodivergence of the same type, and it's I've been thinking about this a little bit lately because my roommate is actually and kind of compared to me, a much more a kind of private, reserved person, and I tend to be an oversharer, and there's a few reasons for that, and kind of one of the kind of main reasons that I've noticed over the years that if you're vulnerable with somebody first, if you're like the first one to be vulnerable, it tends to encourage other people to feel more like, oh, well, if they're willing to be that, open or whatever, then I feel a little bit more safe and willing to kind of reciprocate. It doesn't always happen, but I've kind of found as a I don't want to say a side effect, but I have noticed now, like I probably do overshare too much, and so when I meet people who are very like reserved and very kind of private, it kind of puts me off a little bit. But like that's my problem, not theirs. But it's just something that's been kind of on my mind a little bit lately that you made me think of. But yeah, role models, absolutely. That's something I can also echo. Many of the things you're saying, I definitely echo. um, but yeah, with that said, I think we will move on to the next question here. So I'm kind of rolled two questions now into one, or at least I'm asking them together now, I should say. But so it looks at these ideas of like that as adults, as grown-ups, that we're not supposed to goof around and be silly unless we are, with kids, or unless it's our literal job to goof around and be silly. And a lot of people also think, self-care, I think, is becoming more kind of known and more accepted as not just being this like, five-star pampering kind of thing, but it's still something a lot of people feel guilty about doing. And so I want to ask the two-headed question: what was the last silly or playful thing that you did that didn't involve children? And what was the last act of self-care that you did, no matter how small?
Hmm. So, like, I like puns and wordplay, but only the ones I make. So, sometimes, like when something's going on, I usually make like a poem that's like full of like swear words to describe it, or like I make up silly songs about my cat and I sing it to her. And sometimes my friends get to like hear or see the poems and stuff. Maybe I'll send you one later about about work. So uh, that's kind of like and that can be self-care too, because it's self-expression. And I find that like I love being in my own space because I can say or do like be as silly as I want in front of my cat, and she's gonna judge, but I don't care. And as for like I guess self-care, I actually have like an artwork here. So self-care is like a really big work in progress. And because, mm, it's not as simple as, like we already know it's not bubble baths. Like sometimes self-care is taking out the trash. Sometimes self-care is, um, like moving outside of like changing the relationship that you have with someone so that you are not hurt by your own expectations. So many different acts. So this is my like non-serious artwork that I've made that exemplifies one part of self-care. So learning to say no, like this is a soft no, by the way. See, puns and wordplay. So learning to say no has been really transformative. And like I made that soft no like about a year ago. And it's actually funny that you were talking about oversharing, because like I was gonna say that my act of self-care for today is going to be like not diving deep into my mental health history, because I can overshare sometimes, and I want to build better boundaries because I think that I want to really own my story. And that means that means not giving it away to everyone. And yet at the same time, I don't want to say but, and at the same time, uh, I am much more accepting about this whole journey, and I'm not ashamed that I struggled at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for sharing that. So I know that we both share a love of learning. I can't remember if you actually mentioned it once the show started or if it was in the pre-show lobby, but we both love to learn, and it's a big part of why I created this show and why I do a lot of things that I do. And so this next question is about that. What is the last new thing that you learned, whether it was a skill or a piece of information, and what is something that you would still like to learn?
I'm slowly learning about investments. Yeah, how about that hat? So I've experimented with buying some cheap stocks through an app.
And what is something that you would still like to learn?
I like to learn more about managing my money, because I've been putting it off and avoiding it, and it's exacerbating my anxiety. Like I haven't been making, I haven't been making a lot of money for most of my life. I've just been kind of barely scrapping by, and depending on depending on others. And that's left an imprint. And the way that the way that I've undervalued my work, because I didn't used to charge enough for my art or for my time or anything. So only now am I starting to notice, all right, I'm actually breaking even here. So in order to keep that momentum up, I need to know how to operate in this capitalist world, right? And I know that I have a lot of misconceptions about money still to break down. I didn't believe and act as if my time was valuable, and now I do.
That is such an important lesson to learn, and that's one that I have also kind of learned in different ways in the last few years, especially in attempts to be like a freelancer, and now kind of trying to make art. And I have a merch store which has designs of mine in it, and when having that conversation with other kind of creators of well, how do you price your stuff, because you think you're just okay, well, if we say $30 an hour or whatever, and it took me 2 hours to make this, then it should cost $60. But then it's well, no, because you have to factor in all the time that you put in getting your skill to the point that you can do this. So it's not just the time that it actually took you to make it. It's that time plus however many years and hours and labor and materials. And so that was an interesting, different way to look at it for me. Yeah, and now being because I'm getting much more into multimedia and video and streaming and stuff, and it's almost kind of monetizing my personality in a way, which is both exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, what you said, it's kind of funny. So for me, a lot of people notice me, and I have no idea who they are, because I I have mild prosopagnosia, which is I have trouble recognizing faces. So I have this, I'm famous experience without any fame.
Yeah, I don't think I actually knew that about you, that you have prosopagnosia, aka face blindness. That's I just learned something, and that is something I know at least one other person that has that too, and that is fascinating to me because I sort of have like the opposite problem, and with names on the other hand, that's where I seem to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
The next question here is, this is one that tends to get some pretty interesting answers, no pressure. What would you say are your two of your most dissimilar hats, and the hats in this case being skills or interests?
That took me forever to figure out. And I had like different options, but I think skepticism and spirituality. I'm a huge skeptic, and I love learning about cults and scams and quackery and like manipulation and all of that. Like, I'm fascinated by multi-level marketing companies, pickup artist culture, self-improvement schemes, like all of that. Like I absorb knowledge about it, and it's like, and sometimes I'm like, oh, how could people fall for that? But also I have a lot of compassion for people who are looking for belonging, and that's they become vulnerable to things like that. So like I understand, but it's also kind of like, it's always intrigued me. And like I love debunking things for people. But at the same time, I've developed like a deep connection to spirituality. And I have this sense that like things in the universe are interconnected, and like things are kind of like irreducibly complex, but there's like some beautiful sacred patterns of like everything.
I feel like the next when we hang out again post COVID, that's something I would love to kind of dig deeper on with you, because actually somebody else that I know gave a similar answer, and someone else close to me has kind of a bit of a similar thing too, and it's interesting for sure. There's a new question here I'm going to try. I don't know if it's going to stick in the show, but I thought it would potentially be interesting. Actually, I should give the preface or the premise of this question before I ask it. So this one comes from this idea that a lot of the things that we learn in school we don't actually really ever use in our lives. Like, you learn math, but if you don't go into like finance or engineering, like, do you really use math very often? Like, not too much, or at least not like algebra or whatever. But I do think so. I was curious about this thing of like, it doesn't have to be something that you learned in school, just anything that you kind of learned as part of what you do. And like, is there any unexpected way, or notably unexpected way that you ended up applying that skill or that knowledge to something you wouldn't have thought?
Yes. But so like there's been like so many like I think I do that pretty much all the time, because I just like defy expectations as a human. So it's hard to think of specific examples, but I have thought of a specific example. So there was one time when I was working as a receptionist at a hair salon. And the reason why I did that is because like I wanted to get a discount on getting my hair relaxed, because like it's a fortune. And B, I wanted to challenge myself to do something outside of my comfort zone. And I have some pretty big phone anxiety. So I was working part-time there, and a client comes in and her pants fall off. And like the button is right there. Like it fell on the floor. So, she has other stuff to do, like after her hair appointment and everything. So, and like, she basically, I'm like, how do I fix that? And I don't have a lot of time. And you know how like, when you're doing hair extensions, there's like a curved needle that you sew things on with. So I found a needle for hair extensions, and I used a synthetic strand of hair to sew the button back onto the person's pants while they were like, I think they were like, they got the dye in their hair, so they had to wait anyway. And I was just like sewing with like a fake piece of, but it held on, like it's still like, it's still technically needle and thread.
That is a fantastic answer. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I'm just going to keep things kind of rolling along here. The next question, it has to do with kind of like this idea, another cultural idea of, that like night owls are more creative, or that, that everyone's kind of, or not everyone, but most people are kind of forced into like, the kind of 9 to 5 structure, whether it works for them or not. And I'm curious, and I guess you can answer this. You can answer it for both cases if you want, but I say like, before the pandemic, what was your schedule generally like? And did you have a peak time of day?
I don't think so. Like, I mean, my peak time of day changed according to my health and, just like age. Like I think like, I mean, I spent most of my teens and 20s being pretty depressed, and, I had a lot of trouble with mornings. And, like I've had sleep issues from time to time, and, like, so I wouldn't say that I had a peak time of day. The pandemic changed my life in many ways, but then like my routine has changed from time to time, regardless of the pandemic.
Yeah, so the next question here, we're talking about relationships, specifically close relationships, and I kind of found what I was trying to get at. Again, some of these questions, when I first start asking them, it takes me a few times to figure out what I'm actually trying to get at, and so I figured out with this question what I was ultimately trying to get at, and so it revolves around this idea, and I've come up with names for it. So we've got hype hats and heavy hats, and hype hats are people who are supportive and encouraging, and they hype you up and they just want to see you succeed. And then there's heavy hats, who are people who tend to drain you and make you doubt yourself and kind of hold you back. And so I'm curious, and you don't have to like name specific people, but even if you just want to give examples, who have you had in your life? Can you think of examples of like one really good hype hat person and then one heavy hat person?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to subvert this question a little bit. Sorry, and thank you for letting me. Like you don't have to be in someone's life for very long to have like a significant and formative influence on them. So when I was about 14 years old, like a fresh immigrant, like I came here when I was 13, like in the last few months of being 13. And by the age of 14, I got this job selling ice cream from like a freezer bike. That's what I would do in parks. And like, it wasn't a well compensated job. Sometimes like for the entire day, I would get like 10 cents commission off of like one ice cream. So my whole income for the day would be like $5. Anyway, so that's just like to set the scene. So I'm selling my ice cream, like I'm 14, and a man in his early 20s approaches me, and like he starts asking me about my life, what I do, and like, and a lot of listeners and watchers are like, I know where this is going. And I mean, generally, yes, those experiences also happen, but surprise, surprise, this is not what happened. So this man actually, like one time he brought me sunscreen and multivitamins. And another time, he brought me a bunch of really good professional art supplies, like a portfolio case, some paint, some acrylic paints, some decent brushes, stuff that I could never have afforded on my own. Because at that time I was painting with like a dried out gouache kit on like pieces of cardboard. And, like I wasn't really encouraged by my family to do art. So like nobody really wanted to. So like imagine like really decent supplies that I had like I didn't even know existed. Back then, I didn't really know how to respond to kindness. And because of my, phase blindness and the way that I didn't remember, like, I don't remember his name. I don't remember what he looked like. all I have is like, he took some pictures of me and my cat, who was, by the way, like the same age as me and my best friend. So he like immigrated with us. So yeah. And like, I can't look this person up. I'm so, so, so deeply thankful to the fact that, for the fact that he did show me, he did show me kindness and he believed in me. I have, almost nothing to go with, like, to find that person again. And like, I don't know if I even should, if I even should try. Like, all I have is that I think he went to OCAD, and like at one point he photographed me with my cat. And, uh, I've been kind of thinking over the years that I want to thank him in person. But on the other hand, like, sometimes we don't get the opportunity, and it's okay. Like, it's okay to not have everything that we want. And the heavy hat, again, on the theme that you don't have to be in someone's life for very long to really influence them. So like in grade 8 or 9, our teacher was asking, like the homeroom teacher or whatever was asking us like who we wanted to be when we grew up. And my term came up, and I said, oh, an artist. So this one kid found it really hilarious, I guess, like how I said it, because like I did have more of an accent then. And like you can't see that, but I talk with my hands a lot and I fidget. So he would mock me for the rest of the school year, like in hallways, like artist or something, like a very, very like, I mean, even as I say that now, it's just like, I can feel that in my chest. So, like, it's been, I've been recalling that something from time to time for like many, many years. And, every time I would recall that, I would like imagine him like in a like boring dead end job as a way of like getting my revenge. And then lately, I haven't really needed to do that. Like, I think I've forgiven him, but I do remember his first name still after after all these years. And, like, it's cool because like our brains have a negative bias. We naturally drift towards remembering things that are potentially harmful and dangerous for us so that we survive. So thank you, brain, but no thanks, but still thanks.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really good point that you made about people definitely don't have to be in your life for very long to have a profound effect, positively or negatively. And like I'm glad. Like I think that context probably maybe helped with that answer. I don't know, but thank you for sharing that either way. And I hope that maybe one day you do figure out who that first person was. But yeah, we'll continue on now. The next question, and again, we don't have to go. You only share what you are comfortable sharing here. And so the question, it has to do with mental health or even general health. Like, it doesn't only have to be mental health. But I like to ask my guests what struggles have they had with their health, usually focused on mental health, and how have they worked through them?
Mm-hmm. So, like, this is the year where I've really started to see like all of the dividends from like years of therapy and self-healing work that I've been doing, because, things happened and I was thinking like, things happened and there were some losses that I've experienced, and like, my routine fell apart, and I was more okay than I thought I would be. And it wasn't like some of it was just like crisis coping, because my brain is very good at like dealing with crises and kicking into high gear, because that's that's what my people have been doing for centuries. I am a former Soviet Union mixed Jewish person, so my ancestors' wisdom lives on in me, and so does their trauma, I think. So like, I was doing not okay, but I was also doing more okay than I thought. being able to do these things for myself and finally learning how to like show up for myself and appreciate my own company has been so helpful. And so about my overall mental health journey, like once in a while I discover a concept or an idea that maps onto my experience, and for a while like it becomes my theory of everything. When I first discovered that I had ADHD, you know, everything was, oh, it's because I have ADHD, like, oh, like this makes sense now. So like there have been certain things, like certain things that have like kind of helped connect the dots for me. So first it was learning about complex trauma and how that manifests. Then it was about attachment theory. So basically like how our brains are wired to relate to each other. And then also the idea of neurodiversity. So like that all brains, like not all brains are different. I mean, of course they are, but like there are certain patterns and brain differences, and we do need that diversity in order for our species to really thrive. So, like these ideas have shaped my own mental health practice, things that I seek out for myself to promote my own health, but also like my practice as a therapist, things I offer others so that they can use these tools to, to further their own mental health.
Yeah, for sure. I for some reason I didn't realize that you were ADHD. I know that I believe we share autism in common, but that doesn't surprise me because the people that I tend to get along with the best are other people with a little more than a little bit of neurodiversity. And yeah, it's interesting because I think I've talked about this a little bit on previous episodes, and I actually, for new people to the show, if you would like to hear my own answers to all of these questions, minus the new ones that I'm trying on this episode, if you go back very recently, I did a solo episode where I just answered all of my own questions, so you can get a little bit more of my background from there. But I was originally diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome back in kind of the early 2010s, and again, it kind of did make a lot of things make sense. And more recently, I kind of figured out like, oh yeah, the ADHD is like, the more I read about it, the more I was like, okay, yeah, this is making a lot of sense too. And in the last couple of years, I felt that the ADHD seems to be my more prevailing experience lately. And I'm connecting with a lot more other ADHD people lately. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I don't think that I don't still, have the other autism, but they make an interesting couple inside my cranium. Yeah, I guess to kind of, as I sort of alluded to earlier, one of my friends is currently in a hospital seeking mental health help and support, and I've been quite, like, I've heard a lot of horror stories about how mental health, like particularly like in hospitals, if it's a building or an institution that's not really meant for that. Like here in Toronto, we have CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, which it's right in the name that's part of its, I guess, like mandate and stuff. And I've heard a lot of times that if you go to just a regular hospital with mental health crises, that they don't tend to be very helpful, and they can often make it worse. And my friend is, from what I've heard from them, the first few days, certainly that seemed to be the case. And it was very, very upsetting and distressing to hear. And I had kind of reached out to Kat because I knew about their kind of experience, and said, like, what can I possibly do here? Because I'm really concerned for their well-being. And like, once they're kind of in, especially right now, hospitals are not just allowing people to like have visitors. So my friend was essentially kind of inaccessible and stuck in a situation that was really distressing for them. And I don't know if I have like a particular question for this. I guess if there's any like insight or information that you would want to share kind of in relation to that, and what people should know, or maybe what they should expect if they do seek help for mental health crisis, that is not through like a, I guess, yeah, that's like not through either like a dedicated organization for mental health or through like a, private psychiatrist or something who you've been referred and you kind of trust that relationship, I guess.
This is a bit of a curveball because like having, I work in the mental health field, and I work in some of the, I have worked and volunteered and participated in some of the very institutions that, have also have very like troubling histories of like how clients are, how clients are treated. And there's definitely like there's certain situations where a hospital might be kind of like a last resort that does help people stabilize themselves and save, and really like, save their lives. But like there is always a kind of like a balance, because yeah, lots of hospitals are not equipped for, mental health care. Things are changing, however. So, there are some positive changes to look forward to. And, like there are people in the hospital who really do have like, who have experience and who care and who see you. I mean, these people might be dealing with burnout because this like it's a reality, but like I wouldn't say like, oh, never go to the hospital if you feel like your life is in imminent danger, and like the thoughts that you're having are overpowering. Like going to a hospital is miles better than taking your own life. However, like there are certain things like for example, like it might be better like to rely on your peer network, or to have to rely on a therapist or a crisis line when you when you have a mental health, like when you're having a panic attack, for example. Because like if you're having a panic attack, you go into the hospital, you have to wait in the waiting room for 2 hours. That will cure your panic attack maybe, but um and I know that like different places are different, and it also like how you get treated at a hospital also depends on how you present. But like a lot of time, like I think that one of the reasons why I started my own mental health practice is because the needs of certain people with certain experiences aren't being met by the healthcare system. And the mainstream psychology, psychiatry, like counseling. So I try to like it's my mission to give people a bit of a different experience. I think that peer support can be really, really valuable. So like as a mental health resource as well. I do encourage like when people are learning about ADHD and autism, like there is amazing communities full of like-minded, like literally like-minded individuals, where you can learn where you can learn about things in a neurodiversity positive, empowering way, rather than from like a deficit-based medical model. And I find like that can be a lot more healing and helpful to people than to go in a hospital in distress, because a lot of what we know about autism is from traumatized autistic people. Like autistic people do not have to endure the meltdowns if their environment is accommodating, for example. And like people with ADHD don't have to fail out of school. In fact, like many folks with ADHD like excel in school when they're either accommodated or like or they're able to kind of like suppress their needs. So yeah, like like we talk about diagnoses, but really like a lot of this is differences. Like people with anxiety sometimes have like a great attention to detail, and they will like, excel in certain environments and never like, and not experience as much distress. But like, unfortunately, the environments are made for, a certain type of norm, which doesn't agree with a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to clarify one thing and offer another, I guess, kind of resource. I didn't mean to imply that you should not go to a hospital if you need mental health care. For some people, that is the option that's available. And as you said, it can vary. Like sometimes it can be better than nothing. I've heard a lot of horror stories from friends and peers over the years. And like I've even heard, as I've told you, I've heard some pretty awful things about CAMH as well. So for my friend, I was like, I don't know which one's necessarily better, but this one actually has mental health in the name of the organization. So to me, that seems like it would be slightly better. But yeah, it sounds like things are starting to kind of level out in that situation, which I'm relieved about. But I also did want to mention, in terms of like you're kind of saying like an autism positive and supportive environments and things like that made me think of ASAN, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, which because like Autism Speaks is still getting a lot of attention, and they are a bad organization that does not help autistic people. And just I want to put that out there in case you didn't know. You should look into them. They don't have a single autistic person on their board of directors, I believe it is, and they used to have one, and he quit because he didn't like how things were going. So that should tell you something. And so anyways, yeah, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, and there's other ones as well. Like I think in terms of kind of neurodiversity, a lot of the communities and the resources that are made by the community for the community have been, in my experience, much better and more helpful, and even like validating and relieving and rewarding than stuff from kind of official channels. And I've even found the same thing in in regards to like LGBTQ resources. Yeah, I'm sure you could probably speak to that as well. But I don't. I know you didn't want to like go too deep on this stuff, so I will continue us rolling along here towards the end of the show. But I do appreciate your insight and your feedback there. So yeah, the next question I've been asking about, and the premise of this one is that failure can be a good thing. I think we're both very aware of that, with all the different things that we've tried. Because if you try things and you can figure out what's good for you and what isn't. And so I like to ask my guests, what is something that you have failed at in your life, and failed at in the sense of like, it didn't go the way that you wanted or hoped, but you did learn something valuable from it. And what was it? And what did you learn?
I failed with my 10-year marriage. So I've been separated for a couple of years, and it felt really devastating at the time, for many different reasons, which I'm not going to go into. But like that experience have taught me a lot of valuable skills, I guess. But it's also taught me that like what you need, want, and believe will change over time. Probably. If you're a human being who's invested in their own growth, you will change. And sometimes people that you choose will change with you, and sometimes they won't. But like sometimes you need to let go and you need to move on. And whether it's accepting the new person who is with you, or whether it's letting go of someone who hasn't really changed. So I really like the idea of failing forward. It's a phrase that I heard from actually one of my clients. I love my clients. They give me such great insights all the time. Like I love having insights with my clients together. It's like the most rewarding part of my work. So I know from experience that you learn more from failing than from succeeding. Because succeeding, you're like, oh, all right, I do this one way and it works. But next time it might not work. But when you fail, you learn, okay, like this, this is the, so I find that, failure can, when we attach value judgments to failure, like it hurts and it kind of like paralyzes us, because shame is meant to make us stop whatever it is that we're doing. And like a lot of us, myself included, especially growing up in Russia, we have been shamed for like not succeeding. So yeah, I'm actually pretty proud of failing some romantic relationships in the past. Uh, funny enough, because I think that now I'm much better equipped to be someone's partner, because I have built this relationship with myself. That, I wouldn't say it's like a love affair, but, I see myself as someone who is, smart, resourceful, loves kind of like, loves to like play, and can take things seriously if needed. Like I see all of these qualities in myself that, whoever my partner is, they will be able to appreciate those things about me, but they don't need to, because I appreciate those things about myself. And it's helped me open up to appreciating other people as well, because it's really hard to appreciate other people when you feel like you're less than them.
Definitely. That's another lesson that I kind of picked up more recently. It's sorry, I was just having a moment of like producer brain and host brain were kind of like talking past each other. um, but yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think, yeah, a few people have said similar things, that relationship failures, that's something, and it's absolutely true. And like when you were saying that, like, if you things always work the first time you try them, you don't learn anything. And I just instantly thought of like, all the people, quote unquote, with born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and how they think like there's this idea that that they've earned what they have, and then when they get to a point when like they suddenly actually experience real hardship or real adversity, and then they're just like, well, this isn't fair, this has never happened before, something's not right. It's like, no, this is what most other people experience, you just haven't had to yet. So anyways, moving on from that, next question here, the last kind of official question, I guess, that I ask to the guest. We've obviously, a lot of the different things that we've talked about could fall under advice, certainly, but if we could to like distill, that's the word I was looking for earlier, you could distill the advice down. If you could give advice to a teen, a 30-year-old, and a grandparent, it could be different advice for each group or the same advice for all three, what advice would you give?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess, dear teenager. I mean, honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm still, but it's really interesting. Anyway, to a teen, I would say that, it's okay to be confused and not know what you want. Like, this is the best time to be confused and not know what you want, even though you really want to, get on with life. But you don't have to have it all figured out, even though there's a lot of external pressure for you to do that, like pick your entire life path when you're 17. Like, I know that it seems it's like this is kind of the hardest, like this is kind of like the most difficult part of your life yet. But one of the things that I want to tell you is like, learn to be kind to yourself, because that's a skill that you're going to need for the rest of your life. You can't, hate yourself into being a better, healthier person. So, if there's one thing that you need to learn, and I don't want to say need because, I'm not your parent and I don't want to be your parent. I don't want to be anyone's parent unless they agree to it. And then, complications. Anyway, tangent, ADHD, wonderful. But like, yeah, self-compassion is something that you'll need for the rest of your life. It took me a long time to learn. And I can't say that I'm fully there yet, but you know, if I had known about it earlier, and if I you know, like, I think I would be further along in life right now.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I echo a lot of the things that you're saying here. But yeah, so for fellow 30 somethings and for grandparents.
Yes. So fellow 30 something, it's okay to have made mistakes. And you can unlearn things that no longer serve you. So now you have a lot more wisdom and you have a lot more autonomy than you did when you were younger, and you can do better. I believe in you. And as for the grandparent, like, I think it's important for our elders to know that they're not obsolete and that they can still grow and that they can still change, and that there are still, like, there was an article I read that said that, like, older people might need therapy more than any other age group.
I can believe that, especially if they haven't gotten any before. Like,
A lifetime of baggage, eh?
well, because like, so I'll be open about this. I don't mind admitting it. I think I'm currently on my seventh therapist in my life, maybe eighth. I've had a bunch of them because again, it's about finding like the right fit and different phases of your life. And I had my first therapist when I was, I think, like 16, and I was getting bullied a lot in school, and I was very miserable, and it definitely helped. And then again, kind of in my like, I guess I guess it would have been mid to late 20s. Anyways, I've kind of, and now like more recently, I actually had to switch therapists because the one that I was seeing was a great listener and very supportive, but just didn't have the foundation in like social justice and intersectional feminism that was really crucial to things that I'm dealing with. So I was able to find a new therapist who does, and I'm very thankful for that. And I really loved your advice, excuse me. Thank you so much. With that said, now you get the opportunity to ask me a question, and unless you've changed your mind, I know you kind of already gave me a bit of a hint what might be coming if you still want to ask the same thing.
Yeah. Well, as I've decided to be more kind of like, to be more attuned to like what I want, and like I'm really curious about, like what your first impression of me was and if it's changed since.
Yeah, so you told me this probably like a week ago or something, and I've had all this time to think about it, and I really kind of was like racking my brains, and I initially didn't remember how we first met, and you thankfully did remember. And so once you gave me that information, I was like, okay, yeah, I can kind of picture the scene again. We met through a mutual friend, and I think what I remember was just that you stood out to me. And of course, it was like a gathering of like neurodiverse and I believe like gender nonconforming people. So, I mean, all of us kind of stood out compared to perhaps average. But I just, yeah, I kind of remember. Just remember you did catch my attention also because like aesthetically your aesthetics at that time, and still to a degree were the kinds of aesthetics that grab my attention most easily anyways. And I think as I've gotten to know you a little bit more over the years, like, because I remember one time that I came over to your place, and you were getting rid of a bunch of clothes, and I ended up taking a bunch home with me, which was really cool because that was early in my transition, and I was always excited to find stuff that was in styles that I liked, that fit, and that I could just have. And now I think like we've kind of graduated to a point where I think I see us kind of more as like peers and friends, and we can kind of like share and help each other, whereas I think before I felt a little more like back when my like kind of confidence and self-esteem were lower, I was much more like intimidated, and like I didn't want to like, you know, upset you or scare you off or something, because I did that a lot. And like now I feel like you're very like warm and compassionate. Not that you weren't before, but again, my perception was different. I feel like if I try to ramble anymore, I'm just gonna like say something I don't want to say, but I hope that is a acceptable answer.
Oh, you know, I do have Russian face. It's actually my superpower.
Oh, yeah. Man, I'm trying to remember how many years ago that was now. That was a while. But yeah, I kind of always appreciate when someone does put me on the spot a little bit and ask me something that I haven't already answered in some form already. And that's also, I guess, a little bit of insight into me, a little bit more insight into me. With that said, I'm going to ask now, not sort of a question of you really, but I'd like to try to highlight charities and causes on each episode. Are there any specific charities or causes or organizations, or even like people who are doing really great things that you would like to bring some awareness to?
That is such a difficult question because I know a lot of really awesome folks who are doing amazing work in different communities. And I'm trying to be like cognizant, like I just want to explode with all of that. But there have been good news. So there will be an emergency response network in Toronto, which is like connected to 911, where they sought input of different marginalized populations. So it's going to be like a non-police peer support service that responds to mental health crisis calls. And I think the city council voted it in. So it's called Reach Out Support Network, I think. No, like something in Toronto. So it's going to be like a pilot project. And I've been really looking forward to that because unfortunately, like, calling 911 when somebody is having a mental health crisis, a lot of times it's not even the paramedics, it's the police show up. And unfortunately, incidents happen where people do not, people end up traumatized or not surviving. And, I'm speaking not only from like theoretical experience, I'm speaking from, this is the most I'm going to disclose, but I am speaking from personal experience where a crisis call for me did not end well. And, this is something that I will have to live with for, knowing that police are just not equipped to deal with mental health crises. So I think it's great that there is change coming, really much needed change, because, I'm tired of reading all these names of people who have died or who have been, hurt. And what else? I have I try to always there is a secular charity in India run by someone named Hemley Gonzalez, who was a real estate agent in the US of Cuban origin, I think. Hemley, if you're listening to this, I hope I haven't misremembered facts of your bio. And he's just an amazing person. He was volunteering a long time ago at like Missionaries of Charity with Mother Teresa, like not with Mother Teresa, but her organization. And he's realized all of the abuses of power that went there and like all of the religious undertones. And he has made a really, like from the ground up, he has built a charity where people are getting birth control, education, all sorts of things, because he is doing what he's doing what he believes in. And I know many wonderful folks that are just like that. And like his charity was like one of the whenever I feel like donating, his charity is always like the first one on my mind, because our Canadian dollar goes like a long way there. Like I think like $5 can feed a child for a week. And sometimes I feel like especially having been an artist on an abysmal income, like I felt like I couldn't really afford to give a lot to charity, so that was like my option. What else? Bat Conservation International. It's a US-based organization, but I mean Toronto Wildlife Center, right here. I'm maybe hoping once the pandemic is over to like do some wildlife rehab, especially with bats.
Very nice. Yeah, the first one that you mentioned there, I remember seeing that, I think, on Reddit, and it was like that's definitely a super important step in the right direction. And I think they were talking about how Denver in Colorado, the city of Denver, had already done something like this, like I think starting last year or so, and it was getting really positive results. Because yeah, unfortunately, the reality is that police aren't really trained to deal with mental health crises, and they often do tend to like escalate and cause harm. So I'm really glad to hear about that, and I'm glad that council voted in, and I hope that it sticks around and possibly even gets expanded. So that said, thank you for all of those. I don't know if there's anything that you want to plug or feel comfortable plugging, because I know that you're trying to kind of remain a little bit more anonymous, but anything that you would like to share about yourself, like not about yourself, but like yeah, I usually ask about like any kind of like online presence or anything that you would like people to check out.
I'm kind of in the process of, like more like building a more cohesive brand, because like marketing hasn't really been my strength despite wanting to be like, an advertising executive at the age of 6. So right now it's like all a work in progress. But like if there is any text, like if there's any kind of text companion to this episode, I might I might eventually like include some, like I'm trying to make an Instagram presence, basically based on some of the books I'm reading and some of the insights I'm having as a therapist, that clients consent to, like, because sometimes I'll be talking to a client and I'll come up with something that's, a beautiful statement that's, or an affirmation that like rings true to me. So like I would want to share that. So I might be like, I'm in the process of kind of like thinking about that Instagram account. I also make cat toys that are popular in Toronto, but some of them are not safe for work. So like that, those two are very different hats, which I won't talk about here, but I will talk about in the bonus episode. And yeah, right now I'm trying to maybe I don't want to be soliciting clients on the podcast as well, because my private practice is, pretty full right now, because I have another job. Like I also work on a crisis line. So there is kind of like, I do want to say that like, I'm really honored to be here and to be sharing myself with you and with like other folks who are like watching and listening. But I don't know how I feel about having the visibility on a social media platform.
It's always optional. Like I said, I do understand that you are trying to remain at least partially, somewhat anonymous, and I didn't expect that you were going to be like, oh, here's my Instagram, my Twitter, my blah blah blah. Like it's always just, and that's why I said if there's anything you do feel comfortable sharing, you're welcome to. So thank you for that. And yeah, of course, if you want to, like I can always update the show notes in the future to add in any links that you might want me to. As for my own stuff, my list of plugs just keeps growing, and I I guess sorry not sorry. So when you mentioned the private investigator earlier, I thought immediately of my book that I just published recently, Parker and Tucker Private Investigators. I wouldn't say necessarily that I've wanted to be a private investigator like really intensely, but I am fascinated by that line of work, and I would love to interview an actual real private investigator on this show someday. Yeah, I mentioned I have merch, so I'm on, if you go to redbubble.com/people/artemiscreates, there's a bunch of designs there. You can get shirts, mugs, pillows, phone cases, stickers, all kinds of fun stuff. So that's all there. And I just started streaming on Twitch. This is a brand new thing I'm very excited about. I have to thank Twitch streamer Princess Prozac for kind of helping me get into that recently. And I'm likely going to be doing a kind of an possibly an extended stream tomorrow, which will have been in the past when you hear this. So, and yeah, on Twitch, I'm actually planning to experiment with doing some like art stuff, and I'm planning to actually, where is it on this side? The mirror is messing me up. It's this side. So over here you can see my guitar. The listeners can't, but the viewers can. So that is my guitar in the corner, which I've dug out recently, and I am planning to try writing some brand new music on a stream. I'll see how that goes. So yeah. So with that said, so something I've started to do, I'm trying to encourage more engagement and interaction with the audience. So this would be primarily for the YouTube audience, but please do leave a comment about whatever your favorite thing that you learned or heard on this show was this episode. I'm really curious to hear what's really resonating most with people, or what's your kind of light bulb sort of moment. Oh yeah, so now we actually have to do the hat part. I almost forgot. Oh, see, it's been a little while since I've done one of these. My life has been kind of erratic lately, so I'm a little bit discombobulated. But so I know what hat you're going to be wearing. You don't know what hat I'm going to be wearing. But as always, I try to match the guest, and I have a special. This is going to be a repeat hat, which I try not to do normally, but there's a reason that I'm doing it this time. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I can go first.
Okay.
Do I have to, I can just put it on now, or do I have to disappear and reappear with a hat?
No, you can just put it on. That's adorable.
Yeah, I needle felted it myself. I wanted to add some bats along the brim, but then I wasn't sure if I wanted to make the bats out of leather or out of like felted wool. So this is a sunset hat sans bats.
Well, so I wore this hat originally for the Halloween episode, and I am re-wearing it because I knew you were going to wear an orange hat, and I knew that you love bats, and this is an orange hat with a bat on it. So I kind of have to hold it up, but I love stuff like this. It just
this
tickles
is excellent. Me. Thank you.
Yes, and we are both. You told me that you were going to wear some form of purple or bluish purple or something like that, and because I knew I was wearing an orange hat, I wore kind of an orange undershirt here, and so I'm kind of like we're coordinated ultimately. This hat does not like. It's also I'm wearing it over my headphones, which doesn't really work so great. But oh, there we go.
Yay.
Yeah, so that is that, and that is that with the hats, and the show has already gone very long, so actually I guess I should keep this on so that we can, yeah, I'll just do that. So yeah, thank you for watching again. Thank you for collecting hats with us today. And I would, again, if you want to leave a comment with what the latest hat that you've collected in your own life has been, that would be very welcome as well. And we're going to head over now and do the bonus episode on Patreon. So that'll be another 6 questions, another 15 or so minutes. And if you subscribe to that, then you get that plus some other bonus content. And yeah, and hatcollecting.com, at hatcollecting on social media. I'm Artemis Creates on social media. And thanks for watching. And until next time, stay curious and keep collecting those hats.